What if the fairy tale was a trap? Not a glamorous misstep or a love story gone sour, but a carefully calculated operation, orchestrated with surgical precision and emotional manipulation. A story sold to the world as a tale of freedom, love, and healing. But that, behind the curtain, was something far more troubling. That's the question now burning through headlines, echoing in private corridors of power, and haunting the voice of a man once known as the world's most beloved prince. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. At 41, Prince Harry has finally broken. Not publicly, not at a podium or on a podcast, but privately, in a moment of raw, unfiltered vulnerability. A moment so intimate, so direct, that even those closest to him weren't sure whether to treat it as a confession or a warning. Because if what he said is true, if Meghan Markle did, in fact, marry him not out of love, but for money, fame, and power, then everything we've believed, everything they've told us, everything they built together, is now in question. And the cracks are no longer whispers. They're shattering through their carefully curated image. This isn't a story about scandal. It's a story about disillusionment. A man raised in the shadow of unimaginable privilege, stripped bare of everything except the aching need to be seen, heard, and, perhaps most dangerously, understood. So how did it come to this? How did a prince who walked away from the monarchy to protect his wife and children find himself, just a few years later, whispering to a confidant, "She used me. She married me for the spotlight"? I see that now. And more importantly, what comes next? We begin not with the headlines, not with the documentaries, not with the gossip columns or Twitter feuds. We begin with that single moment of admission. Unguarded, unscripted, and wholly devastating. There are moments in a man's life where clarity doesn't arrive gently. It punches. It cuts. And for Harry, that moment didn't come in the middle of a storm. It came in the quiet, when the world wasn't watching. Sources say it happened during a low-key weekend retreat in California. No cameras, no staff, no Netflix cruise. Just Harry, a few close friends, and an open fire. It was late, maybe 2 in the morning. He was staring into the flames, swirling the last of his drink, and said it softly, almost like he didn't believe it himself. "She married me for money and fame." Nobody responded right away. You don't respond to something like that. You let the words sit. Let them breathe. Because once they're said, there's no walking them back. And it wasn't said with anger. That's what makes it worse. It was said with resignation, with a kind of dull ache. Not explosive rage, not self-pity, just acceptance. That moment, if true, changes everything. It forces us to re-examine the past 7 years, the love story, the departure, the interviews, the lawsuits, the endless branding and rebranding of their identities. If Harry no longer believes Meghan's love for him was real, then what does that say about the world he left behind to be with her? What does it say about the cost of love, loyalty, and freedom? Now let's be clear. This isn't about choosing sides. This isn't about pitting Meghan against Harry or the Sussexes against the Windsors. It's about zooming in on the slow unraveling of a man who once seemed so sure of his path, so certain he was doing the right thing, and watching that certainty collapse under the weight of private truths. We've seen Harry struggle before. We saw it after Diana's death. We saw it when he admitted to panic attacks, to substance use, to resentment toward the press. But this is different. This is the kind of fracture that doesn't just bruise, it redefines. And yet, despite everything, he hasn't made this public. Not directly, not officially, but the signs are there. If you know where to look, you can trace the breadcrumb trail. A growing unease in his interviews, increasing absences from public events, quiet reshuffling of business ties, leaked tension between him and Meghan's inner circle. And now, this whispered admission. Whether it slipped out during a moment of exhaustion or clarity or both, it marks a turning point. But let's pull back for a second, because you might be wondering, why now? Why is this moment, this quiet unraveling, so important? Because the mythology of Harry and Meghan has always relied on the strength of their bond. They sold their story not just as royals on the run, but as soulmates against the world. That bond justified their choices, their battles, their businesses. Without it, the entire narrative begins to crumble. If their marriage was built on uneven foundations, on ambition instead of affection, on image over intimacy, then the rest of the story, from Oprah to Archwell, begins to feel performative, like a stage play written for a global audience, with one character beginning to question the script. And that's not just sad. It's dangerous, because when your brand is your relationship, cracks in the relationship become cracks in the brand. And cracks in the brand, that means lawsuits. That means investors pulling out. That means reputational freefall. It also means this: isolation. Harry doesn't have the royal family anymore. He doesn't have the military. He doesn't even seem to have a stable support system outside of Meghan and a shrinking team of advisors. So if that bond is broken, or if it was never truly real in the first place, then what's left? We have to ask ourselves the uncomfortable question: did we all fall for it? Did Harry fall for an illusion? And did we, by extension, believe in it because we needed it to be true? Think back to that engagement interview. Remember the glances, the laughter, the story about roast chicken? At the time, it felt refreshing. A modern romance. An American spark lighting up British tradition. But even then, some royal aides raised quiet red flags. Some whispered, "It's moving fast." Others said, "She's too media-trained." One allegedly joked, "He thinks she's Diana reincarnated, but she's running a very different playbook." At the time, those were brushed off as snobbery, racism, conservatism, and maybe some of it was. But in retrospect, were those early voices onto something? We may never know. But we do know this: Harry is not the same man who left the palace gates. And this admission, this late-night confession, feels like the beginning of something, or the end of something else. And perhaps the most chilling part isn't what he said. It's what he didn't. Because when asked what he planned to do about it, when asked if he was going to confront her, or leave, or speak publicly, he apparently just shook his head. "I don't know," he said. "It might be too late." Too late for what? Too late to undo the damage? Too late to reclaim the narrative? Or too late to leave? That's where the unease creeps in. That's where the story veers from drama into tragedy. Because if he's trapped, by contracts, by custody concerns, by public perception, then this isn't just a marriage in trouble. It's a man unraveling in real time. And the world is watching. Silently. Eagerly. Anxiously. This exposé isn't about gossip. It's not about throwing stones or making villains. It's about understanding how power works in the shadows of relationships. How love can be weaponized. How ambition can masquerade as connection. And how even a prince can find himself wondering if he was ever truly loved at all. Throughout the next chapters, we'll trace how he got here. The love story that began like a Netflix script, but slowly turned into something else. The red flags Harry ignored. The deals that changed everything. The silences that spoke louder than press releases. We'll hear from insiders. From former staffers. From friends who tried to intervene. And from legal experts watching closely for signs of a financial or reputational unraveling. And yes, we'll talk about the children. About how public they were supposed to be, and how hidden they've become. About how privacy was demanded, but performance continued. And we'll ask the question no one in the palace dares to ask aloud anymore. If Harry wanted out, could he even leave? But we're getting ahead of ourselves. First, we need to return to the beginning. Not the fairy tale beginning, but the real one. The one that doesn't make it into engagement videos or documentary B-roll. The one that began not with love at first sight, but with a pitch. Because long before there was a wedding, there was an opportunity. And long before Harry said, "I do," someone else said, "He'll do." But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. Was it ever real? That's the question that keeps creeping back. Not just in private circles, not just among palace aides or family members, but now, uncomfortably, inside Harry's own head. Because when a story begins to unravel, it doesn't start with an explosion. It starts with a tug, a single thread pulled from the edge. You don't notice at first. You keep moving forward. You smile. You pose. You tell yourself it's nothing, until it isn't. And that's how this story begins. Not with betrayal or rage or scandal, but with the quiet, creeping suspicion that something wasn't right. The world remembers the magic. The rollout was perfect. Too perfect, perhaps. A transatlantic actress with a well-trained smile, a platform built on activism, and a knack for public speaking. A royal prince with tragic baggage, rebellious energy, and a desperate yearning to escape his past. The press framed it like a movie. Two worlds colliding, cultures blending, an institution bending, and love winning. But that version of the story has holes. Big ones. Let's go back to the beginning. Not the version you saw on the BBC or in glossy magazines. The version that played out behind the scenes, through whispers, side eyes, and phone calls that never made the final cut. The first time Harry mentioned Meghan to his inner circle, the reactions were polite, cautious, supportive, yes, but you could hear it in their voices. The hesitation, the unspoken really, that hung behind every "sounds great." "She's amazing," Harry had said. "So grounded, so strong. I think she understands me in a way no one else has." That last part, that's what struck people. Understands him? See, Harry's always had a thing for emotional intensity. He doesn't do halfway. When he feels, he leaps. And Meghan knew how to make someone feel seen. It's one of her gifts, actually. One of the reasons she did well with causes and interviews. She made you feel like you were the only person in the room. And for Harry? After decades of being reduced to a title, a spare, a headline, that kind of attention is intoxicating. But the speed? That's what raised eyebrows. Within weeks, he was flying her into Kensington. Within months, there were security adjustments. Private dinners. A few royal protocols bent, then broken. Aides whispered that Meghan was being accommodated at a level we've never seen before this early on. She wasn't just dating him. She was positioning. Now, that doesn't mean her affection wasn't real, or that she was playing a long game from day one. But even Harry's oldest friends, guys from Eton, from Sandhurst, from his army days, noticed the shift. "She didn't seem like the kind of woman you dated," one said quietly. "She seemed like the kind of woman you launched a brand with." And Harry was different, too. There was this edge, this urgency, as if he knew he had to lock it down before it slipped away. Maybe it was because Meghan wasn't waiting around. Maybe it was because she made it clear she had options. Or maybe, and this is where things get uncomfortable, it's because she knew exactly how to hook a man like him. Think about it. She was beautiful, sure. Articulate, yes. But more than that, she was emotionally attuned. She asked about his mother. She brought up therapy. She echoed his anger at the press, his frustration with the monarchy, his sense of being misunderstood. And she didn't recoil from his pain, she leaned into it. If you've ever lost someone, deeply, early in life, you know how magnetic that feels. Someone stepping into your private storm and saying, "I see you." I felt that too. Of course he fell hard. But here's the thing. That kind of emotional bond, it can mask a lot. It can make you overlook things. Like the fact that she barely introduced him to her own family. Or that her longtime best friend stopped responding to her calls around this time. Or that when staff began quietly flagging inconsistencies in her accounts of events, they were told to stand down or focus on the bigger picture. Still, the engagement happened. Fast. Too fast, according to some courtiers. But Harry didn't want to wait. And maybe, in some way, he couldn't afford to. He was already feeling the tension inside the palace. Meghan wasn't like Kate. She wasn't trained. She had opinions. Strong ones. She didn't defer. She questioned everything, titles, roles, protocol. And she didn't hide her frustration when doors didn't open fast enough. Privately, one senior aide is said to have warned Charles, "She's not joining the system. She's trying to redesign it." At the time, that comment was dismissed. Charles reportedly said, "Let them be. They're different, but that's good. It's time for the family to evolve." But others weren't so sure. Especially when Meghan allegedly made her first bold request, a formal change to her role, before the wedding had even taken place. Details are sketchy, but sources suggest it involved branding rights, personal staff control, and a redefinition of her duties independent of Harry. It was unprecedented, and that's when the dynamic shifted. Harry